Some documentaries have been hailed as groundbreaking and thought-provoking, when the reality is far more grim or falsified. There are also the odd chronicles that simply didn't age well, based on newfound information and unwanted realizations. Number 10. In March of 2020, the world was introduced to a gripping docuseries that would become the most notorious creation ever released. It was Tiger King, the miniseries that became a sensation overnight, prompting discussions, memes, and mockery across social media platforms, all while captivating the audience. In a true crime and outrageous drama, Tiger King peeled back the layers of exotic cat breeding and the battle being fought against it. While television screens were ablaze with unexpected twists and outlandish characters, the series quickly became the most watched documentary of 2020. At the center of a turbulent tale was Joe Exotic. Through a legal settlement, he was able to gather enough cash to open a ranch that soon morphed into a menagerie that teemed with exotic wildlife. Lions, tigers, and ligers became the spectacle, attracting crowds and earning Joe the legendary local celebrity status. Beneath the surface of a showman, though, there lurked a dark underbelly, one motivated by nothing more than profit. The docuseries reveals how Joe, hungry for money, bred tigers and paraded his wild pets across the country. It didn't take long for the unethical act to catch the attention of animal rights activists, particularly that of Carole Baskin, founder of Big Cat Rescue. Baskin would become the biggest thorn in Joe's side. The Tiger King documentary reveals a growing feud between the two that ultimately unfolds into a homicide-for-hire plot. Joe wanted his rival gone, and he was ready to do just about anything to have that happen. Tiger King was marketed as a true crime documentary that exposed the big cat trade and their domestication. But instead, the documentary is riddled with exaggerations and misrepresentation, blurring the lines between fact and fiction. With Joe Exotic and Carole Baskin being cast as villainous caricatures of themselves, the narrative of the film becomes heavily sensationalized. Ultimately, what started out as revealing a business that rides on exploitation became a soap opera. Viewers were distracted from the initial focus, the welfare of the exotic cats, and instead found themselves submerged in a drama that gravely misrepresented the realities of big cat ownership and what conservation efforts truly look like. Sensationalism overshadowed the journalistic intent, leaving the viewers to grapple with the question, what truths get lost within the tangled web of entertainment? The real twist in Tiger King came a whole 2 seasons before the series could wrap up. Joe found himself in handcuffs, convicted of a shocking plot to execute his rival. He was also in violation of the Lacey Act and Endangered Species Act, awarding him a 22-year sentence, ultimately highlighting a more troubling aspect of Tiger King. Among these, though, critics pointed out something else about the documentary, which made it all the more troubling. The makers of Tiger King had failed to address and report the rampant animal abuse present within Joe's zoo. His unethical practices and mishandling of big cats were all captured on film, but they dangerously ignored these ethical concerns, maintaining focus on human drama instead. Number 9. Michael Moore really made a name for himself as a world-famous filmmaker. He became quickly renowned for tackling some controversial topics like Bowling for Columbine, Capitalism, a Love Story, and Where to Invade Next. These documentaries quickly shot him to fame, but it was Sicko that truly serves as the most poignant critiques of American society. This documentary delves into the profit-driven American healthcare system in comparison to other countries, ultimately shedding some light on the dire consequences that the citizens face. From the get-go, we're met with a slew of scenes that portray the harsh realities one must face against the American insurance system. First, we're met with an injured worker, who, instead of rushing to the hospital, opts to stitch his own knee. He's just one of 47 million Americans who are uninsured. We then follow the heart-shattering moment of a couple who are forced to occupy their adult daughter's spare bedroom. Medical bills for the husband's heart surgery and the wife's cancer treatment pushed them to bankruptcy. The next scene, the most gut-wrenching of them all, was the grief of the mother, who recounted the loss of her daughter, who was refused transportation to the hospital by an ambulance simply because her insurance wouldn't cover it. In sharp contrast to this, Moore visits Britain, where his search for a billing department in a hospital leads him to a welcoming discovery: a cashier window whose sole purpose is to reimburse patients the funds they used to get to the hospital for treatment. Sicko made one thing painfully clear: healthcare is a basic human right, not a privilege reserved for only the rich. While scrutinizing the American healthcare system and its profit-driven motives, Moore also finds himself faced with the realities of the citizens who either have to seek alternative solutions or be left untreated. For viewers in other countries, the narrative may seem exaggerated or unbelievable, since free universal healthcare is a norm pretty much everywhere else. As he travels to places like Canada, the UK, and places within the US, Moore interviews both patients and doctors, unraveling the differences in healthcare costs, quality, and salaries in these countries. In doing so, he reveals a corrupt and dysfunctional system, exposing the myth perpetuated in an effort to deter the American population from embracing a system of free healthcare. Not only does the filmmaker take on insurance companies, but targets pharmaceutical corporations and politicians who profit from maintaining the status quo. Although it was released all the way back in 2007, Sicko remains just as relevant today. North America continues to operate as one of the most dysfunctional healthcare systems where profit takes precedence over patient care. Number 8. Nanuk of the North, the silent predecessor of the modern documentary world, released in 1922. And it was created by Robert Flaherty, who spent a year living among the Inuits of the Arctic Circle, documenting his experiences with Nanuk and his family. During that year, Flaherty bore witness to several aspects of their daily lives, including trading, hunting, fishing, and migrations, describing them as a civilization barely touched by industrialization and technology. It was this documentary that would be hailed as the first full-length anthropological documentary in the history of cinematography. The film focuses on the Inuit man, Nanuk, who lived on the shores of Hudson's Bay with his wives, children, and dogs. The film portrays the unindustrialized fisherman and hunter faced with the constant struggle to find food. The documentary was no doubt groundbreaking and served as an insight into the dwellers of the most unlivable area. If only it was based on fact. In the years following the release of Nanuk of the North, something daunting was revealed. Robert Flaherty's revered documentary film, the first of its kind, was based upon a lie. It was a script-based making, compromising the truthfulness of the documentary, leaving many wondering what is fact and what is fiction. Several aspects of the film were manipulated and defaced. It started with something as simple as an altered name, and the real Inuit man saw his name changed to Nanuk. The film also used reenactments instead of actual scenes, forcing one to doubt its authenticity. Probably one of the most tasteless aspects is that a lot of the daily Inuit lives were fabricated. Those who were willing to participate in the film were asked to hunt using traditional harpoons and blades, even though they'd already been exposed to and were making use of firearms, specifically for hunting. The tribe wasn't as untouched as Flaherty was making it out to be. While this may have been the filmmaker's way to represent a foreign world, he did so through fabrication, ultimately allowing the viewers to misconceive what the Native American world was truly like. Adding to his lies was the most famous and celebrated sequence in the film, the building of the igloo. It may come as a shock to some, but Flaherty cheated here too. That igloo had been constructed twice its usual size, before being cut in half to make room for the filming equipment. The documentarian's initial focus was to educate, but it turned into fictional entertainment, forcing the celebrated film to become a topic of controversy. Number 7. It was the mid-'80s when a slew of violent crimes left bodies in its wake. The unknown assailant lurked in the shadows of Los Angeles, waiting for his unsuspecting victims, who were mostly chronic narcotics users or ladies of the night. As police began investigating the onslaught, they dubbed the unidentified homicidal maniac the Southside Slayer, only to later realize that the spree was committed by several different and simultaneously active individuals. Among them was the notorious Night Stalker, who later turned out to be Richard Ramirez. As the years passed by, and the LAPD realized there was more than one person committing these violent acts, they began investigating several possibilities. They started looking for the differences and similarities between the slayings, and discovered that one particular group all made use of the same element, a .25 caliber firearm. This onslaught, dubbed the Strawberry Homicides, was attributed to one unknown perpetrator, the Grim Sleeper. His crimes were found to have started in 1984 and continued into the 2000s with a 2-decade-long cool-off period, earning him the nickname the Grim Sleeper. By 2010, a potential suspect found himself behind bars. He'd already done some prison time for assault, but there were missed opportunities to pin him as the serial slayer, since the investigators hadn't collected DNA evidence at the scenes of the crimes prior to the 2000s. His name was Lonnie David Franklin Jr. It was in 2014 when Nick Broomfield took a dive into the case and spat out a documentary that he titled Tales of the Grim Sleeper. The documentary investigated the serial slayer who terrorized South Central Los Angeles over a span of 25 years. He had discarded the bodies of the deceased in dumpsters, left to rot with the debris, or in alleyways along Western Avenue. With the suspect in mind, Broomfield told the untold stories of the victims and the evidence against Franklin. The investigative journalist found himself interviewing friends, neighbors, and community activists, illuminating a rather chilling tale. But although they had a suspect, the Grim Sleeper wasn't charged yet, and due to legal delays, the trial was pushed back further and further. Although the documentary film had revealed the unknowns, there were still questions that were left unanswered, including, was Lonnie David Jr. the Grim Sleeper? It wouldn't be until 2 years after the documentary that we would finally get the answer to that question, making it all the more chilling. In 2016, the trial against the suspected serial slayer commenced. By now, he was 63 years old. During the trial, he pleaded not guilty, with his attorney promising a vigorous defense, but investigators were sitting on some serious evidence. That 2016 trial ended with a guilty verdict. The suspect named in the documentary was correct. The former garbage collector was the Grim Sleeper, and he was responsible for no less than 10 counts of homicide, and possibly much more. For this, the jury called for capital punishment in all 10 of those cases. Before he would be executed, though, the homicidal maniac would be found deceased in his cell, and the cause of his demise has never been publicly released. Number 6. As we so learn from Sicko, the medical industry is no one's friend. Profit often takes precedence over patience. The Bleeding Edge is another documentary dedicated to investigating this terrifying reality. In 2018, it was released as a Netflix original, where director Kirby Dick delves into a $400 billion medical device industry, only to be hailed as a dystopian nightmare. Accompanied by another investigative filmmaker, Amy Ziering, they turn their focus to the industry, where they examine a daunting negligent regulation system, corporate cover-ups, and profit-driven impetus. In their investigation, Amy and Kirby uncover a harrowing truth where life-saving technologies may be doing more harm than good, all because the medical device industry is far less regulated than that of pharmaceuticals, a disturbing realization. The Bleeding Edge ultimately explores the impact that faulty devices have had on patients, from contraceptive devices leading to both pain and failure to artificial hips being the driving factor behind cobalt poisoning. Most unnerving of all, the film reveals the FDA's process that allows for such devices to be fast-tracked onto the market, despite no human testing or proper clinical studies taking place. The documentary ends with the investigative individuals revealing that no one from the FDA or other companies agreed to be interviewed. Following its release, The Bleeding Edge became a topic of discussion in the medical industry, even though it should have already been a topic of discussion before being publicly exposed. Between 2015 and 2018, in the UK alone, there have been 62,000 adverse incidents linked to medical devices. 1,004 of those resulted in an unexpected and untimely end. The United States has seen 5.4 million adverse events reported in the past decade. This included 1.7 million injuries, 83,000 passings, and almost 500,000 removals. Investigations revealed that patients who rely on pacemakers found that their devices were faulty, and the manufacturers were well aware of the problems. Hernia mesh complications have prevented some of Britain's top athletes from competing for years. Spinal disc replacements have disintegrated in patients. The list goes on. Following the release of The Bleeding Edge, more investigations into the medical device industry were prompted, revealing more dark and twisted turns within the healthcare system. From 2018 to 2022, more than 5,000 recall events took place, all of which were associated with 13,623 different medical devices. 15% of those recalls had a patient passing associated with the medical device. These studies, though, took place a few years ago, so surely the healthcare system ought to improve since they were exposed. It turns out that The Bleeding Edge didn't have much of an impact on the industry after all. A 2025 study revealed that manufacturers who are required to report adverse safety events within 30 days do not often do this. They're often late to report the events or don't report them at all. Many of the reports came 180 days later, allowing for more patients to be given a medical device that may or may not cause their unexpected end. Number 5. Walt Disney often demonstrates the docile nature of wild animals. This is most definitely not the case in real life, and Timothy Treadwell is one man who would go on to discover this through the documentary Grizzly Man. Treadwell and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenot, document the time that they spent among the grizzly bears of Alaska. The pair would periodically journey there to live with the wild and dangerous creatures to study them. While claiming to be protecting the bears from poachers, park rangers noted that there weren't such incidents ever recorded at a national park. But Treadwell insisted that he was a friend to the bears, and had even gained some of their trust, enough for him to go up and pet them. The rangers believed that the only reason that he was able to do this was because the bears were so taken aback by his direct and casual approach that they just didn't know how to react. The film director, Werner Herzog, made use of 100 hours worth of footage shot by Treadwell to create the Grizzly Man documentary. In addition to adding the views of friends, professionals, and experts, Herzog also narrates his own interpretations of the events that unfolded. The Grizzly Man's ventures spanned over 13 summers. He would typically stay from the summer season to October in the Katmai National Park, recording his experiences that would go on to become a tragic documentary. One summer, the couple decided to stay a bit longer during a time when the bears were on the hunt for food to store up for the winter. It was during the days leading up to hibernation that the beasts became increasingly aggressive, an aspect that would lead to an almost unexpected fate. While camping out among the now aggressive bears, Treadwell and his girlfriend were mauled, leading to a tragic demise, all of which was captured on camera and omitted by the director in Grizzly Man. It was a harrowing end to an otherwise intriguing documentary. It gave viewers an insight into the increasing delusion of befriending bears, revealing a phenomenon in which Treadwell managed to evade being attacked, suggesting that humans and the most dangerous creatures can be friends. But the end of the film ultimately proved this wasn't the case. Number 4. Serving as a real-life thriller, the Icarus documentary plunges into the dark underbelly of the sports world and the failure to capture well-known athletes who've been sucked into the world of narcotics for competing. Brian Fogel, the film's director, sets out on the journey to uncover the shocking truth while also getting more than he bargained for. Icarus sees the testimony of one individual who works in the testing labs. Don Catlin exposed a workaround that allows athletes to take performance-enhancing narcotics without being caught. In 2014, Fogel, who's an amateur cyclist, lost one of the toughest cycling competitions, having competed in the race void of all narcotics. In an effort to expose the underworld of athletes, he teamed up with Catlin. The two devised a plan, all of which is apparent in the film, to help Fogel take performance enhancers without being detected. Before their plan could go forward, though, Catlin backs out, concerned about his own reputation, and instead places the documentarian in connection with Grigory Rodchenkov, a Russian scientist and director of Russia's National Anti-Doping Lab. The two devise a plan to administer Fogel with banned narcotics in a way that would evade detection, allowing the documentarian to experiment and prove that the current tests are insufficient. But while he was studying these insufficiencies, Icarus mistakenly exposed a major Ocean's 11-style narcotics scheme. Midway through the documentary, with Fogel getting his own performance enhancers, a much larger tale of state-sponsored doping in Russia is revealed. But it gets worse. As a thrilling story unfolds within the documentary, Rodchenkov becomes a whistleblower. It turned out that under Rodchenkov's watch, Russia was not as anti-artificial performance enhancing as we may have thought. The Russian scientist unraveled a world in which he helped not only design but implement a system that gave Russian Olympians an artificial, narcotics-driven advantage. They also actively worked to hide the whole thing from the WADA and IOC. The most disturbing discovery of all was that, according to the scientist, the cheating system was an order that came from the very top of the chain of command, Vladimir Putin himself. As Icarus dives deeper into the whistleblower's claims, Fogel steps out of the spotlight. What began as an experiment into doping in his favorite sport was now something greater, something much more dangerous. What makes this documentary all the more creepy is that Rodchenkov now fears for his life as more details expose a massive Russian conspiracy. His claims were not only documented by the filmmakers, but also by attorneys, the IOC, and the New York Times. If fearing for one's life wasn't enough to make this simple, quirky documentary into a complex thriller, the suspicious passing of Rodchenkov's colleagues should be. Number 3. Holy Hell, a suitable title for a cult documentary in which non-consensual violations of members become common. Hypnotism was a regular practice, and threats of execution became a norm for those wishing to leave. Will Allen, a videographer, found himself becoming a longtime member of the Buddha-fueled new religious movement in the mid-'80s. In 2016, he would release a hair-raising film that reveals life within the confines of an explosive organization, one that he only barely escaped. The film jumps between shots of Allen during his time in the cult and present-day interviews with former members. Although it starts with a cheesy narrative, capturing the loony spirit belonging to an expected 80s hippie, from which the cult arises, it soon becomes something more, revealing not only the heights of being involved in a community of freed members, but also the depths of hell they've been forced to endure. In the documentary, we're met with various scenes of captivated followers, but there's one oppressive figure dominating the foreground: Mitchell. This mysterious figure comes off as disingenuous to viewers today, but back in the 80s, he was revered as an all-knowing force, leading to an accumulation of followers who wished they hadn't become involved. With his obscure accent, he would host meditation sessions wearing a bathing suit. The Sundance documentary reveals the spookiness of this centrical character, his false wisdom, and his malevolence. Allen truly captured the scale of evilness and how Mitchell presented himself as a living god, promising to take the unsuspecting group to a state of enlightenment. But the guru's agenda was much more fitting with other notable cults. He wanted money and power, and he would do anything to get it, including subjecting his followers to mistreatment. He was a con artist, hell-bent on exploitation and brainwashing. The documentary certainly takes on sinister undertones, so much so that one almost expects a homicidal scene or the appearance of a demonic entity. It quickly becomes clear that Mitchell never lifted anyone to a higher place. Instead, he encouraged secrecy, forbidding anyone from talking about what was going on in their own lives. He mentally and emotionally abused the members, but wrote it off as a cleansing ritual or a remedy. He also forced them to get plastic surgery or exercise for a harrowing 3 hours a day. The vague guru would also be followed around by slaves, who played the role of masseurs and cooks. Then he was on the run. Mitchell and the Buddha-fueled movement up and left for Austin following the exposure of misconduct, allowing suspicions to arise. Austin wasn't suitable either when more suspicions came to light regarding his management of things within the cult. After changing his name, Mitchell fled again, and the cult dissolved. By the end of Allen's film, although he'd been boasting about his escape from the mysterious, creepy cult, he seemed the tiniest bit still under the spell of Buddha-fueled. The documentary is certainly unsettling, twisted, and almost unfathomable. Number 2. Innocently, we sat on the couch, flipping from channel to channel, hoping that our favorite kids' shows were on. With eyes glued to screens, we watched the antics of Sam and Carly unfold in iCarly. as well as the lives of Drake and Josh, and we got wrapped up in the love triangles of Zoe 101. But little did we know of the sinister scenes that lurked off-screen, shattering the world of powerful child performers and silly scenes. It wasn't until the documentary, Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, drew back the curtains, revealing toxicity and predatory behavior, that we now look back on those shows only to cringe with terrifying realizations. What were once innocent segments became troubling to watch. The docuseries is a 5-parter that details the behind-the-scenes world of toxicity, which seemingly focuses on Dan Schneider and his rise to become a television producer. The series unlocks an alleged accusation of a hostile work environment, misogyny, and a home for abuse predators such as Brian Peck and Jason Michael Handy, both of whom now find themselves incarcerated. Quiet on Set examines the underbelly of abuse that actors and actresses suffered in children's entertainment. Appalling revelations became apparent from the former prominent figures of the Nickelodeon network. The docuseries brought several previously unknown aspects of our beloved shows to light. For instance, The Amanda Show spurred a lawsuit over gender discrimination. It's revealed that 2 female writers present in the show's making were forced to split a single salary. Those 2 writers would also be subjected to inappropriate behavior from their fellow male co-workers. In the show All That, cast members revealed that they often felt extremely uncomfortable with their stunts. Those stunts harrowingly included putting live scorpions in their mouth and drinking water from a tub in which a trucker allegedly bathed. The docuseries revealed some seriously bizarre, disturbing, and unfathomable things about not just Schneider, but the rest of the entertainment industry behind him. The investigative efforts to put this documentary together started as early as 2018. Conveniently, Nickelodeon severed ties with Schneider that year, who maintained his innocence and denied allegations of misconduct. What makes Quiet on Set truly disturbing is that even though it exposed real testimonies, discomfort, and behavior that was predatory in nature, no legal action was taken to investigate the claims. Number 1. In 2009, a bizarre documentary was released, bringing a creepy urban legend to life. Cropsy, the boogeyman of Staten Island, intrigued native filmmakers Joshua Zeman and Barbara Brancaccio so much that they decided to return to their hometown to create the documentary, one of legend and lore turned fact, leaving a chill behind in the viewers. It wasn't because of a horror tale, but rather the truth that lingered ominously within. Joshua and Barbara remembered the chronicles of Cropsy, a story that started off as nothing more than a cautionary tale. It was one invented to keep explorers from wandering the forgotten halls of the abandoned buildings that once belonged to the Willowbrook Mental Institution. The story spoke of an escaped patient who lingered in the shadows, snatching children from the streets, sometimes with a hook in one hand and a red-stained axe in the other. The urban legend most hauntingly wouldn't stay as such, and by the late 70s, the residents of Staten Island were about to find out how true Cropsy was. Young residents of the town began disappearing. It started with 1, but that quickly racked up to 3, then many more. They were the victims of one figure, the infamous mythical Cropsy. Joshua and Barbara's documentary of this tale explores the hidden world and the truth that lurks within. As they began to unravel the clues and came across hair-raising information, they became immersed in shocking revelations that would ultimately be the makings of a chilling documentary. The duo became enraged in the possible theories and underground tunnels of Willowbrook, cult-like activity, and a suspect who was already behind bars. The legend of Cropsy was in circulation in the 70s, the same time during which Andre Rand, a former custodian of Willowbrook State School, was lurking around. As panic and chaos gripped the area, the body of one missing person was discovered in a shallow grave. Fingers pointed at Rand, who resided in a makeshift camp on the property where the remains had been dauntingly discovered. It didn't take long for him to become the embodiment of Cropsy, and not long after that, he would be convicted of 2 kidnappings. The documentarians explore the nature of legend and the suspect behind it. While trying to find an alternative explanation and citing the lack of evidence when it came to the former custodian, the filmmakers would uncover a twisted story. The story spoke of child abductions, slaughter, Satanism, and mob mentality. Rand certainly fits the legend. He worked at the school for the mentally handicapped, one that was later shut down for its alleged abuse and misery. He'd already been convicted for the abuse of a girl and attracted much attention when more disappearances began to rack up. Although he appeared as the ideal suspect, there was just one problem. There was no physical evidence, a feature explored by the documentary. Nonetheless, Rand would be sentenced to 25 years to life. In 2004, another look into the case found the alleged monster receiving yet another 25 years. Still, there was no physical evidence. All the investigators and angered parents had were allegations that he was the last one seen with one of the missing girls, and resided on a property where one such victim was found. But the documentary, citing the clear lack of evidence and the need for closure, presented a possibility. Perhaps the real Cropsy is still wandering Staten Island. That being said, following the arrest of the potential suspect in 1988, those strange disappearances drastically dropped, with only a few missing children being reported in the years to follow. Though never formally charged, Rand was held responsible for several more disappearances, with no bodies being found. After extensive investigations, only 2 of the incidents could be tied to the man who was allegedly active in Staten Island, as well as South Bronx. Subsequent inquiries found that Rand had been involved in several other incidents, 2 of which were accusations of assault, where neither party pressed charges. While driving a school bus, he'd also picked up 11 children from a Staten Island YMCA and purchased food for them without the consent of their guardians and parents. He then took them to an international airport. While none of the children were harmed, Rand was arrested and jailed for 10 months for unlawful imprisonment. Following the release of Cropsy, many viewers arrived at a startling conclusion. Some believe that Rand, convicted with a first-degree kidnapping charge, had ties to Satanism and kidnapped the children so they could be used as a sacrifice. The most chilling part of all the speculation, including that of detectives, is the belief that he didn't act alone, but was instead passing the children along to an underground network. It also came to light through a fellow inmate that Rand, who maintained his innocence, had bragged about his exploits and compared himself to Ted Bundy. He claimed that both of them used Volkswagens in their crimes. But the most sinister thing that the criminal allegedly said was something that turned the documentary into a horror movie. And that was that Bundy targets women, and his were kids, adding, "Do you think the police could figure that out?" His defense attorney would later claim that those statements were just pretentious prison boasting, but many believe otherwise. That alternative belief is that Andre was the Staten Island Cropsy, the kidnapper of children, and his later prison boastings only added credence to this terrifying tale. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.